People and Politics.
Welcome to today's episode of People and Politics podcast. My name is Paul O'Kane. I'm a member of the Scottish Parliament for the West Scotland region. And this podcast is really all about unique stories and the people who make our communities across the region the places that they are and the great places to live and to work. And I'm sure there's some listeners out there who want to hear all these great stories as well. During the COVID pandemic, many people seemed to discover a new appreciation for the outdoors and for nature. And whether it was perhaps having walks in woodland or strolling up a green hill, there was something that really felt good for the soul. And for many people for years and years before that, they've always known that being outside and being in nature is something that is so valuable for our general health and well-being. Because the natural environment is so much more than just a viewing pleasure, and I'm sure my guest today can tell me just how important it is to maintain the natural environment and the many wonderful species that we have who live with us in that environment. So I'm delighted today to be joined by RSPB Lochwinnoch Site Manager Tabby Lamont and the Warden Dan Snowdon. And thank you so much for being here and for coming on to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent, great. So many people who listen to the podcast will know where RSPB Lochwinnoch is and what goes on at the reserve there. But do you want to maybe just, for anyone who doesn't know and who hasn't been, and if you haven't been, what have you been doing? You know, because it's just such a wonderful, beautiful place. But do you want to tell us a wee bit about RSPB Lochwinnoch and what goes on there? We'll start with Tabby.
We're a wetland reserve and we've got lots to do for everyone. We've got 2 lochs, we've got bits of woodland, we've got a lovely boardwalk that takes you right into the middle of said loch. We've got play areas for kids, we've got quieter bits, we've got lots of birds to see, we've got scrapes with waders on it, breeding waders, migrating waders. We've got lots of wintering ducks, lots of things. I probably missed lots of things.
There's an extensive list, of wildlife you can see there.
Yeah. And how long has the reserve been established? You know, and what's the history of it, I suppose?
So RSPB took it on in 1978. 1973 we signed the first lease, and the building was built in 1978. And it was because the area has a really long history of being important for wildlife. So it's part of an extensive floodplain, stretching for miles originally. And over time, that's kind of been drained for agriculture and things like that. But there was a real interest in trying to restore it and return some of it to really good condition for wildlife. So, nearly 50 years RSPB's been involved.
Yeah, and 50 years people have been coming and getting involved, so either by visiting and having some of the great experiences or volunteering as well, is that right? So people getting involved in, Tabby, you said you started with RSPB as a volunteer.
So RSPB is hugely reliant on volunteers, and I actually started volunteering over on Isla.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And then found my way back here, but we've got loads of volunteers right up to this day. We've even got family volunteers, so there's no such thing as too young or too old. We've even just built a workshop which has an accessible bench, so people in kind of wheelchairs or with mobility issues will actually be able to do practical volunteering for us.
Fabulous. Set up for everyone to get involved.
Absolutely.
Great. And obviously you guys have day-to-day roles now within RSPB. So do you want to just say a wee bit more about what your job involves? So Warden is quite a grand title, isn't it? So what's that like?
It's great. I love my job. It's absolutely fantastic. I think it's probably my dream role.
Okay.
I have to say that because Tabby's here. But it's really, really varied. And that's one of the good things about it, but it can also be a bit of a challenge. So my role involves everything from bits of project management and project delivery all the way to putting up shelves, monitoring wildlife, everything in between. So very, very varied. Lots of things to learn, which I really enjoy. And for me, it's kind of the sweet spot in terms of having as much impact as I can, suiting my skill set, but also still getting hands-on and in touch with things, which I think I would miss that if I wasn't getting that side of it.
And how did you get into this line of work? I suppose
It's
what was your
kind
route?
of by accident.
Okay.
So I had an office job. I
Yeah.
was, in inverted commas, a musician. So I was earning no money, had to have a job to pay the rent. And I'd always been interested in wildlife. I used to watch David Attenborough programs when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But it never occurred to me that I could have a career in it because I hadn't done those relevant subjects at university. And then I just randomly discovered the RSPB volunteering scheme, did a week up at Lochgarden and then 3 weeks up at Forsenard in the Flow Country. And the staff there were really helpful and friendly, and I don't know if they told me directly, but I got the idea that just by doing volunteering I could get enough experience maybe to get my foot on the ladder with a job. So I had some savings. I was able to go full-time volunteering for a while, and then managed to get my first job before my savings ran out. So that was my way in. So it just kind of happened organically.
Yeah. And I suppose for any young folk listening, because we're always really keen to say to young people, particularly this time of year when folks have done exams and they're maybe waiting for results, there is no wrong path in terms of a career. And it sounds like both of you had interesting ways in through volunteering. So, I mean, would that be your advice to folk, is, you know, give it a go and it can lead you to places you never maybe thought you would be in?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, volunteering for me, it helped me find what I was good at and what I was not good at. So it was a nice way to kind of bounce my way to my ideal job, I think.
Great, fantastic. And you're the site manager, Tabby, so what does that involve? That's a big job.
Yeah, it's no 2 days are the same. So it's a very eclectic job. It can involve everything from planning the reserve, whether it's habitats or whether it's the visitor experience. Sorry, I'm talking my hands now.
Sorry, I do it all the time.
or whether it's infrastructure, there's just so much to it. So at the moment, a lot of my time has been spent on trying to get the interim facilities up and running, because our visitor centre is due to be demolished now, unfortunately. And then it will be spending a lot of time on trying to plan the next steps, where I've also put an awful lot of time into working with Dan to plan the habitats and the bigger picture stuff. So we've been, over the last few years, we've been trying to transform the habitats of Lochwinnoch. Once upon a time when people visited, they used to say, "Oh, have you seen anything today?" Whereas now, almost every time you meet somebody, the question is, "What have you seen?" So that gives me a real sense of pride.
Yeah, of course, it's been really built up to that kind of status of it being something you can see all the time. And interestingly, we'll maybe touch on the visitors centre. You know, people will know that building well because it's been there for a long time, but clearly has some issues in terms of its future, because in terms of its structure, I suppose. And so do you maybe want to say a bit about why it's being demolished and what we're hoping to try and do in the interim?
Yeah, so it's a wooden building, and it was built in 1978, and it was actually built of Norwegian pine and brought over from Norway. And I think at the time the hope was that it would last a very, very long time, because these kinds of buildings do in Norway. Unfortunately, we have had increasing problems over the years, and last year we had a full structural survey, and the recommendation was demolition. It was a sad decision. It is very iconic. It's an iconic building in the local area, but it's a decision we did not take lightly. But it's a decision we had to make all the same for the safety of our visitors and staff, and volunteers. We have been then concentrating on providing interim facilities. We didn't just go for your really basic things. We've tried to get something that looks nice and in keeping to tide us over while we plan the next steps.
Great. So that will be available soon, we hope.
It's available now.
It's available now.
So we opened at the weekend.
Excellent.
And it's been very well received by visitors that have been there already. It's surprisingly spacious inside. I think a lot of people were fearing the worst. And we've got a toilet block as well.
Good.
So people are welcome to come along. We've got all the same things.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like, you've put that interim solution in place and it is being well received because people value the visitors' facilities and they're so important. But of course, the reserve is so much more than just the building, and it clearly the goodwill, the passion, the care for the biodiversity of the site, that continues regardless and will continue whatever happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So at RSPB Lochwinnoch, our big focus is that we're very conscious that we have the luxury of having a bit of a jewel in the area, and we work very hard to increase the biodiversity in the area and make it as good as it can be for wildlife, which means having a variety of different habitats, and that in turn produces a variety of wildlife, and then that acts as a bit of a storage area, so that then as other areas nearby start to improve, there's the species can then populate those areas from ours. So we take that responsibility very seriously.
Great. And are there certain species that you might see at Lochwinnoch that you might not necessarily see elsewhere, or is it quite common across the west coast? What can be seen at different times?
Yeah, we've got a real mix. So last year we actually had a record breeding year for the reserve. So there's an expanding range of species and number of individuals of those species that you can see at Lochwinnoch now. I think one of our biggest success stories recently would be actually getting our black-headed gull colony back. And gulls are often not something people get excited about because people think there's loads of them. And
they think they're annoying,
yeah,
urban dwellers picking out the bin.
Steal your chicks and that kind of
yeah.
thing. But I want to talk about them because they're actually really important for a whole host of reasons. So first of all, many gull species are struggling and kind of becoming amber and red listed, which a lot of people don't know. But also they're really important ecologically for other species. So they're what you might call an umbrella or a protector species. Our black-headed gulls in particular, because they're colony nesters, so they'll nest in a big colony. They don't tend to predate other birds, so they're not really a risk to other chicks. And wildfowl and waders will actively seek them out to nest amongst them because of the extra protection they provide for other predators, so larger gulls, crows, that kind of thing that might take young. Black-headed gulls are great at deterring those, so they're really important ecologically, and they bring a real sense of vibrancy and life to the reserve as well now. So there's a notable difference when they're on site. You can hear the calls and it just feels really alive. We also have redshank breeding on the reserve this year, which is a wading species. And we're one of the only known sites in Renfrewshire with breeding redshank now because they've declined so much. And we've actually fledged our first ever redshank chick this year. Wow. Which has been very nerve-wracking and very exciting.
Can imagine.
Watching it running around. Yeah.
And do you want to say a bit more about how would we recognise redshank and what does it look like?
So they're well named. So redshank, red legs. Yeah. So the adults in particular have got these really bright orangey red legs. So that's a real giveaway. And some of the other wading birds are actually named like that. There's green shanks as well, so they've got green legs. But yeah, red legs, red bill, that's their main distinguishing feature.
Sure. And you're always on hand, you guys, to give people that step for a hint about what they're able to see and give them the opportunity to experience that. And do you find that quite rewarding when people maybe come for the first time to engage and to watch? Is it quite fulfilling to see people get excited about it?
It is. It's lovely. We do some work. We've got a community engagement officer that works out of Glasgow, the Give Nature Home team, and they quite often come to the site with groups. And they brought a group of I can't remember. It was underprivileged families anyway that had hardly ever been out in the countryside. And they said, and you could see the children were just so happy to be outside. Like they didn't want to come in. They were just happy to see outside. And it's always quite sobering when you take groups out, and it kind of reminds us that the things we take for granted, like robins and blue tits and wrens, that for a lot of people these are really quite special. And there's no such thing as a boring bird or a common thing, and that all these things are amazing. And yeah, seeing people like come in and really kind of enjoy it and love it, it's very rewarding.
Yeah, and I think it's a great leveller because it belongs, we have this shared home, and we have a shared environment, and it so accessible to all of us, and that's real privilege. But also with that comes the responsibility to help try and preserve and protect it. And I suppose that's so much of the work of what RSPB does, is trying to preserve it for the species and for the future generations who will enjoy our natural environment. So I wonder if you can say maybe some of the risks that we're experiencing. I mean, climate change is an obvious one that springs to mind, and I know you do a lot of work thinking about climate change and helping, for example, farmers to think about how they farm. And so do you want to say a wee bit maybe about that in the context of Lochwinnoch and more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about Lochwinnoch, and I'll
Right,
hand over to Tabby for the difficult stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's all about trying to make the habitats as resilient as possible for what's coming. And we don't know exactly what's coming, but we do know there's going to be change, and we just don't know the rate or the extent of it. So we have to try and make our habitats as resilient as they can be for a range of conditions. And that means, well, it can mean a few things. So it can mean trying to expand the range of species, because the more complex an environment is in terms of species and structure, the more habitat niches there are within that area, and there are more opportunities for wildlife to survive in different conditions. So complexity is a big one, and humans tend to simplify through their management of the countryside because it makes it easier for us. But for wildlife, simplicity is not a great thing. So it's introducing some complexity and trying to restore processes so that the land can actually look after itself without needing to be intensively managed. So sometimes you need to manage intensively to create a set of conditions for a specific species. But for overall resilience, you need the land really to be self-sustaining. And that means the waterways functioning, grazing animals, so that the kind of vegetation provides that range of complexity. So yeah, it's trying to restore function and process is kind of what we're thinking about. That all sounds a bit dull, but that's really how you make a habitat resilient for climate change and changing temperatures and increased rainfall and all the things that we think we're going to get.
And is your partnership with the village of Lochwinnoch important in that respect? Because it's the populace that lives next to the reserve and probably has the most day-to-day interaction with it. Has that been quite important? And what have you been trying to do to maybe bring people in?
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I mean, basically, we're on a floodplain, so everyone, ourselves and the people that live in the village, are all affected by how the floodplain is managed and what happens to it in the future. So the things we try and do are running events, get people on site, explain about what we do, helps to get them to support the work that we're doing, but also there's a lot they can get out of it as well, access to green space, improvements for mental health and so on. It's trying to get everyone on the same page, I guess you might say. But we do kind of outreach and engagement work as well, so there's people in Glasgow that will do a lot of that in Glasgow, and we try and do the same at Lochwinnoch too.
Great. And more generally, in terms of RSPB Scotland and the work that you're doing, it is really about that agenda of how do we combat really, really challenging time for nature more widely?
It is. So the RSPB is a really strong campaigning organisation, and I know there have been some big wins recently. So I know people might think that the sand eel fisheries thing is not directly related to climate change, but it comes back to what Dan was saying about that resilience, that if you have healthy habitats, healthy food sources, then it means that nature will be able to withstand a lot more. Coming back to, so as well as the campaigning, another really important part of RSPB work is enthusing people in nature, getting them to value it, because so right down to Lochwinnoch and encouraging people from the centre of Glasgow, I'm talking my hands again, encouraging people from the centre of Glasgow into the reserve. They if they come to the reserve and they have a good time, they'll value the place that gave them that good time. They'll value nature, and they'll be much more likely to do their bit to save it. And whether that's little things like making sure that you recycle, and or whether it's bigger things like joining a conservation organisation or even writing to MSP. It's everybody can do something, and if we all do a little bit, then we'll win the fight to save nature.
Yeah. And absolutely, I mean, I recognise so much of that from a busy inbox and mailbag, as you can imagine, but so many people who are supporters of RSPB writing to me and sharing their views and their ideas about what we do in terms of legislation in Scotland, what we do in terms of regulation. We've had a number of significant pieces of legislation go through the Parliament in the last 4-year period that have had a direct impact in terms of farming, in terms of land reform, and thinking about those sorts of things. So it's really important for politicians, I think, to engage. And one of the first things I was able to do after we came out of COVID, when I was just elected, was come to the reserve and be taken round, and it was a lovely day, and really to see on the ground what's going on. And, I say to all of my colleagues, they should get out and meet. And there's loads of opportunities to do that because RSVP are such a good campaigning organisation, as you say. I think the other thing within Scotland and in the Scottish Parliament, we're quite lucky is that, we've got Nature Link, and we're looking at sort of species champions. So I know there's a lot of bird champions in the Parliament. I'm actually the species champion for porpoise. So I'm yet to be taken, because they do come to the Clyde, but it can be quite hard to see them. So if anyone who's listening has seen a porpoise, let me know. But it is important that MSPs then have a direct link to animals or flora and fauna, or because it gives us a sort of stake in that as well, and in what our constituents are doing. But yeah, I suppose in terms of RSPB as an organisation, it's a charity. So it takes a lot of effort and to sustain a charity and to keep it going. And, charitable giving has changed a lot since the pandemic and things like that. So, how do you operate in terms of funding and getting the right funding to be able to do the work you do?
We rely very heavily on our members. People often think of RSPB as being a huge organisation and being really rich, but that's not the case. We spend all the money that we get. We spend it very fast, and we spend it trying to do a lot of different things. So membership is very important. We obviously have a retail arm as well. So we have a shop at Lochwinnoch, which is very important, and corporate support, so from companies, and also grants. Dan and I seem to spend a lot of our time at the moment applying for various grants. So all the work that we do at Lochwinnoch, from all the habitat work that we've been talking about, the new interim facilities, everything, we are constantly needing to get grant funding for that. We have a very, very small core budget that if anything extra we want to do on that, top of that, we have to find the money. So it is a lot of work, but as you said before, it's very rewarding when you're walking along the path or the boardwalk and you're seeing the black-headed gulls flying overhead and screeching at you, and dragonflies and damselflies flying around you, and it is lovely.
Of course,
you've done a good job.
Yeah, I think you described it as a jewel, and I think that's so true. Yeah. I think anyone who lives in Renfrewshire or more widely across the West would recognise it as a real jewel, and maybe a hidden gem to some extent as well, some parts of it. So, if anyone hasn't been, I would certainly recommend it. But, what's the best way to get involved? We spoke about volunteering, we spoke about visiting. Is it just kind of rock up and have a chat with yourself and, see what's going on?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, we have a range of volunteer roles. So retail volunteers, visitor engagement volunteers, what we call practical volunteers, so out on the reserve doing habitat management, that kind of thing. If you're not sure what you might enjoy, just come along, speak to us. You can have a trial day doing something, see whether it's right for you. If you have got a clear idea of what you want, again, just drop us a line by email, give us a call, pop in when you come down. We'll, give anyone an opportunity, basically.
Good.
Yeah.
And as you can hear, I'm sure if you're listening, friendly bunch, warm welcome awaits, and the odd cuppa, I'm sure, and, always maybe a biscuit.
And ice cream. We have ice cream.
Ice cream, fantastic. Absolutely, that's the way to do it.
Dan hasn't eaten it all.
Yeah. Does happen sometimes.
And I suppose more generally, because, people in their own homes and in their own communities thinking about preservation and conservation, I think the big bird watch has been, is that the right title? What about
Big Garden Bird Watch.
Thank you, Big Garden Bird Watch. Something that people can get really involved in really easily. But, there are other things that people can do in their own spaces, in their gardens, in their local park, to think about how do we help nature, how do we help birds?
Ponds in gardens are always good.
Yeah.
Not concreting over it if that's possible. It's not an option for everyone. And recycling.
Yeah, of course.
It can be things that aren't particularly cool, but that's a really important one. Minimising waste, that kind of thing. Eating local produce if you can. Growing your own if that's an option for you.
There's so many ways that people can get involved. It's actually something that I'm really passionate about, because I think a lot of us are struggling with a sense of apathy maybe about the way things are, and feeling like we're powerless and there's nothing that we can do. But there are so many ways to get involved, and there's so many opportunities for people to make a contribution. So there's volunteering with an organisation, there's all the things Tabby's mentioned. There is, people can starting their own initiatives like community trusts and non-profit organisations because they're passionate about a certain issue. Looking after your own area, so starting an organisation for your village, seeing if you can green that. All sorts of ways, and there's millions of examples out there on the internet of inspiring things that people are doing. So there's lots of examples that can give you sort of hope and inspiration, and maybe you can take that idea and change it or replicate it in your area.
And I was going to say, not everything takes a huge amount of effort. So, we all live busy lives and, sometimes putting food on the table is your number one priority. But I think the bottom line is no matter how small your contribution is, it's important. Yeah. And don't feel that just because you don't own vast swathes of land and can't do massive big things or don't have the time, to run your own community organisation, you can still do something. And also sometimes other people are running these organisations and you can drop in and help out when you can.
I think that's really valuable to hear, because I think, it's the global scale of the challenge that feels overwhelming. We do have a real challenge in terms of the climate crisis, in terms of the emergency, in terms of trying to do something. And you can feel powerless, I think, and global events in so many ways make us feel powerless. But I think if we can make change in our communities in our small ways, then actually hopefully that adds to a head of steam that actually makes a difference overall. And for young people listening, because I know that climate anxiety is a real thing for a lot of young folk, and they are probably so much more plugged in and aware than even we have been or were. I think it's really important that they get involved. So what's the best way for young folks to get involved? Maybe just, you see a lot of school groups, I imagine, and things at Lochwinnoch.
So we have family volunteering at Lochwinnoch, and you can come along. You don't have to come along regularly. You can come along for just one session if you like, or you can come along regularly. We have various self-led activities and things as well. We're trying to push self-led volunteering for things like Himalayan balsam. I'm not sure if that's quite developed yet.
Not quite yet, no.
But we'll
watch this space.
Watch this space.
Exclusive.
Those are the...
Yeah, I think finding like-minded people as well. I think for young people, I sadly don't qualify as one anymore, but I think for young people it must be very, very difficult. And again, joining a group, joining an organisation can give you that kind of support network. And I think I actually find hope in people and the things that other people are doing. Look for like-minded people, I think would be my first bit of advice.
Great, fantastic. And we've got a couple of minutes left, and what I like to ask my guests is to tell me the thing that you think is unique about Lochwinnoch or about the reserve. What's your favourite part of it? And I know that will be hard to try and distill down, but...
Oh, that's a tricky one. Have you got an answer?
I think I can talk for a while you think of something really cool. No pressure. I think probably someone asked me not that long ago what my favourite experience at RSPB Lochwinnoch was, and that was an easy one. We were doing a breeding bird survey, which is very early in the morning, but the reserve is at its quietest, it's peaceful, and I was walking, I just came out from behind some vegetation at the side of the loch, and an otter was swimming so close to me that I even got a really good photo with my phone. And you know how difficult it is to take wildlife shots with your phone. And it was there for ages as well, just swimming away. And I think that's probably what is special to me about Lochwinnoch, is that it's not that far from the centre of Glasgow, and yet you can have these really special moments that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Of course, yeah. Dan?
I would second that. I think the thing that stands out for me is something that's a little bit less visible, but it's about the potential of the area, which I think gets forgotten because it's not one of the big flashy places that you hear about a lot, but it's on an extensive floodplain that could be restored for wildlife. It's next to the largest regional park in Scotland, Clydemere Shield. Yep. And there are lots of initiatives springing up that I think in the future are going to deliver some really big things for people and for wildlife. So that's what I'm excited about, and that's what I think is unique to the area.
Fantastic. So please, if you're listening and you haven't been to RSPB Lochwinnoch, please head down anytime. You'll get a warm welcome and a great experience, and think about how you can support the work of RSPB more widely. As always, if you have something going on in your community, or you're doing something interesting and you think you'd be up for having a conversation with me on the podcast, then don't hesitate to get in touch and we will have a wee chat. But to Tabby and to Dan, who are both very, very busy people, thank you so much for being with us today, and look forward to seeing you soon down in Lochwinnoch.
Thanks,
Paul.
Cheers.